We can't hear you.
Yeah.
All right, try that. I'm just trying to get the cursor over.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay. Up to the left, so that means it should be coming this way. So yes, got it. We're good.
All right. Can I be heard now? Can anybody respond?
Yes,
Can you hear us?
yes, from the Zoom.
Okay, thank you very much. So, all right, very quickly, I'll redo this. I apologize. Those of you that know me know I do not like computers. So tonight is my pleasure to introduce Jessica Wolff, who lived in Reno, Nevada for most of her life, has lived there for most of her life. She received her bachelor's degree from the University of Nevada Reno in 2014. Post-graduation, she worked in the solar industry sector before turning her career to her real passion, animals. Jessica has spent the past 2 years as the Urban Wildlife Coordinator for the Nevada Department of Wildlife and is now their Wildlife Education Coordinator. When not working, Jessica can be found hanging out with her pets and partner. She also spends time trying new recipes and seeking success gardening in northern Nevada, which she says is only for the strong of heart. Tonight, Jessica will be talking about the Nevada state mammal, the bighorn sheep.
Thank you. That and this, so then I can walk around. Thank you all so much for having me. I appreciate it. Super excited to be here. This is definitely one of my favorite topics, bighorn sheep, because there's so much to learn about them. But for a little roadmap of the night, we're gonna first briefly glance over the evolution of bighorn sheep. Definitely not my strong suit of knowledge, but I had to put it in there. The different types of bighorn sheep, some of their amazing adaptations, some of the issues that we have with their population, and then some of the management that we do for them. And at the end, we'll hopefully have a little bit of time for a few questions. And if we have to get out of here, we can meet in the parking lot and I can try and answer them to the best of my ability. So for our evolution of bighorn sheep are one of 2 species of mountain sheep here in North America. We've got the bighorn as well as the doll, and we'll kind of go into what each of those look like in a second. But wild sheep crossed the Bering Land Bridge from Siberia into Alaska during the Pleistocene era, which lasted from about 2.5 million years ago to about 11,000 years ago. And they were diverged from their closest ancestor, the snow sheep, about 600,000 years ago. They are in the Bovidae family, so that means that they have cloven hooves. This helps them to have balance on uneven surfaces or rocky hillsides, and many of them will climb up hills to escape predators, as well as to get to those delicious, delicious snacks that maybe some other species can't get to. They are ruminants. This means they ferment food in their rumen prior to digestion. That helps them to soak up all of those delicious nutrients from all of the vegetation that they're using and eating. In the Bovidae family, it includes cattle, bison, and antelope, not deer. Deer are not in the same family as bighorn sheep. They are in the Cervidae family. Right now, there are about 143 existing species worldwide and about 300 species that have gone extinct. Most of the members in the Bovidae family are diurnal, so they're going to be most active during the daytime. There's always oddballs in every family, but most of them are going to be alive or awake during the day. And most of them have horns, except in the cases of domestic bovine, all males have 2 or more horns, and sometimes the females do as well. But let's get into the cool wild sheep. So here in the United States, we've got the Dall sheep and the stone sheep. The Dall sheep, also known as the thin-horn sheep, can be found in Western Canada, Yukon, Northwestern Territories, British Columbia, and Alberta provinces. And then the stone sheep is a subspecies of that Dall sheep, and it can mainly be found in northern British Columbia. But here in Nevada, we have the bighorn sheep, and we actually have all 3 subspecies of bighorn. So we've got the desert bighorn, the Rocky Mountain bighorn, and the California bighorn. And Nevada is one of only 2 states that has populations of all 3 species on our range. So pretty cool. So let's get to know them a little bit better. This here is the Rocky Mountain bighorn. They are the largest bighorn in North America. Rams can weigh over 300 pounds. Ewes are much smaller, about half the size at 125 to 150 pounds. They can be found from eastern Washington to Montana down through Colorado. And if you look at the picture, they're kind of chunky. They are a blockier species. They've got large horns and just a bigger, broader body. But who cares about the other states? I want to know where they're at in Nevada. At the Department of Wildlife, we will break down our state into regions. So we have 3 regions. We've got the Western region. Welcome to the Western region. That's where we're at. Eastern region, and then Southern region. So our Rocky Mountain bighorn can be found in that Eastern region. So Elko County, Lander County, Eureka, White Pine, those regions. If you go check out our website, you'll notice that these are screen grabs from it. So we have a bunch of species cards on it, just a little plug here, and they have these for all of the species that we have on the website. For our California bighorn, they have various habitat preferences. They can be found in alpine habitats down through the Great Basin sagebrush habitats. They're going to be smaller than our Rocky Mountain bighorn. Rams are going to weigh anywhere from 120 to 220 pounds, ewes around 100 to 150. Their horns will splay out more than the Rocky Mountain bighorn, and they have a little bit less of a curl than that big Rocky Mountain does. And they can be found here in our Western region. And then last but certainly not least is our desert bighorn. They have a relatively large range. They can be found all over the Southwest United States down into northern Mexico. So pretty large range. They're smaller than the Rocky Mountains, but the rams can weigh over 200 or up to 200 pounds rather, and ewes will be up to about 130. Their ears, as well as their tails, are typically longer than the other subspecies that we just talked about, and their horns are longer and thinner as well. And in Nevada, you can find our amazing desert bighorn in both the Western region as well as the Southern region of our state. But more specifically, here is a nice map of all of those subspecies that we have. So in the pink, you'll see the California bighorn. The blue is the desert bighorn. And then the itty bitty green that we have is that Rocky Mountain bighorn. And then there are splotches of yellow throughout that map. And those are potential bighorn sheep habitat that could have a population at some point in time. So hopefully we'll see them there in 10 years when I bring this map up again. So just some fast sheep facts. The bighorn sheep is the state mammal for 2 states. Here in Nevada, the desert bighorn gets that title for us, and Colorado has taken on the Rocky Mountain bighorn. Male bighorns are called rams. I'm sure you kind of gathered that. Females are ewes, and their young are called lambs. Ewes will typically live anywhere from 10 to 14 years in the wild. Rams will live about 9 to 12 years, but they have found ewes that have been about 18 years old, and they have found rams about 16 years old. Relatively rare, especially if you're a prey species like the bighorn. They have brown to gray fur, and that can change throughout the season, and they'll usually be about 3 to 4 feet tall to the shoulder, from hoof to shoulder. So our amazing bighorns, they are herbivores, so they're eating lots of plants, and they will eat the plants based off of the habitat that they live in. So if you're a desert bighorn living down in southern Nevada, you can use your amazing horns, break up in a cactus, and get a delicious treat that isn't going to stick you in the face. If you're up here, you're probably going to be eating a lot more sagebrush, rabbit brush, and grasses. But they're pretty opportunistic. They'll eat just about any kind of plant that they can get their little mouths around. So on the top of their skull, they don't have any front incisors. Instead, they have like a soft palate, and that helps them to pluck the leaves off of the plant that they're eating. And then they'll move that to the back of their teeth and grind them down. Because they are in the Bovidae family, they do have those cloven hooves, basically acting like little climbing shoes for them. Super helpful when you're trying to evade a predator and run up a mountain as fast as you can. They also have really good eyesight. They can actually see up to about a mile away. A mile away. That's incredible. I can barely see 100 feet in front of me. Their pupils are also, if you look at that picture over there, they're horizontal. That gives them a more panoramic view so that they can check out for predators. And they have a better field of vision that way. They also have some pretty awesome behavioral adaptations that help them to survive in Nevada. So one of the behaviors that they'll do is during the really hot times during the summer, like these bighorn sheep in Valley of Fire, they will hide underneath some shaded areas to protect themselves. I definitely needed that today. And then because they're a prey animal, they do hang out in herds. And when they're standing or relaxing, you'll notice them all kind of hanging out and looking in different directions. That's going to add greater protection for their herd because they'll have more eyes looking out for predators. And let me tell you, mountain lions are pretty hard to spot out in the wild, so very important for them. They also have some great water adaptations, which is really important, especially if you're a desert bighorn. During the summer, they can actually go up to 3 days without drinking water when the temperatures are 100 degrees. Crazy. And then in the cooler months, they can go months without drinking water. They get a lot of the water that they use by eating all of those plants. Their kidneys are also super efficient. Most animals like us cannot lose more than 10% of their body weight in water. Otherwise, they will go into dehydration. Whereas bighorns, they're thought to be able to lose about 30% of their body weight before dehydration will start to affect their bodies. And also, they are big guzzlers of water, and they can drink up to about 20% of their body weight in water in a rather short amount of time in order to get all of that in when they can. Their coats act as two kind of great things for them. Number one, camouflage, really important, but also a little bit of a built-in AC. Their coloration helps to reflect the sunlight, which can help to keep them cooler. And both rams and ewes, so the males and the females, both have horns. So they'll use their horns for protection, for fighting, as well as for getting food, like those prickly cactuses that you don't want to get stuck in your face. Ewe horns are typically smaller and usually only about 30 centimeters long, whereas the ram horns will continue to grow and get pretty hefty. But what are horns? Often we have horns and antlers be used interchangeably, but horns and antlers are quite different. So horns are made out of two parts. The first part is a bony core, and then above it is a keratin sheath. So that sheath is made out of the same stuff as your hair and your fingernails, just gonna be a little bit stronger than what I have going on. The horns will grow throughout the lifetime of the animal. Typically the growth will slow down during winter because what's there less of during the winter time? Delicious green stuff to eat and less resources for them. But during the summer, that horn growth will ramp up. For males, their horns can weigh up to about 30 pounds. So ladies, we really lucked out in the bighorn world, not having to carry 30 pounds on your head. Doesn't sound like a great time. In fact, horns can actually account for about 10% of a bighorn's body weight. Look at that thing. How would you want to hold that on your head? I don't want to. And horns are super cool because they do continue to grow throughout their lifetime. We can actually age a bighorn based off of the growth rings that we see on them. So usually you'll start with a second or third year, and then as you go up, you count each consecutive dark growth ring to get an approximate age of the bighorn. You can also do this with the ewes, but it's a lot harder to do because the growth rings are much more pronounced on the males. So everyone wants to know about the rut. This is when those horns really do come out, pun intended. The rut is the mating season for bighorn. We use the rut to talk about deer mating season, elk mating season, as well as bighorn mating season. Males will use those lovely horns to fight each other over social standing and get to know who gets access to all of those awesome ewes. And during the rut, males can run up to about 40 miles per hour at each other. 40 miles an hour. Ouch. So typically for our desert bighorn, their mating season is August through November, and they'll have lambs in January through June. For our Rocky Mountain and our California, they usually have their rut in October through January, and then we'll see lambing season in April to June as well. They did luck out a little bit. They have a 6-month-long gestational period. And after the lambs are born, they're actually pretty mobile and able to climb. And they'll start eating vegetation at about 2 weeks of age. They'll be fully weaned anywhere from 1 to 7 months. And then they're fully independent by that second spring. So mom only gets them for, 9 months, 10 months? She's pretty lucky. Ewes will form nursery groups so that the lambs can be protected. Some ewes will stay behind and care for the young while while the other ewes will go out and forage. And then rams, on the other hand, will stay in groups of anywhere from 2 to 80 individuals. Now, if you're running at each other at 40 miles an hour, you gotta have some built-in helmet action going. So here's a little video that I think might play. But there's a couple different ways that a bighorn has to not get a concussion when they're doing those amazing acts of mating. The keratin on their horns, will absorb some of that impact. They also have a skull that's super, super thick and resists fractures. I actually have this one right here that you can kind of see a little bit better. So this is the front of the bighorn. That's where they're gonna hit each other. So that will kind of compress a little bit and protect their brain, which is right here. Their brain cavity is pretty tight. Their brain sits nice and tight in there to kind of resist some of that movement that will happen when they do run at each other at 40 miles an hour. Gotta really dig that one in. And then they also have a little bit of a bubble wrap action going on. When they are getting ready to smack, they'll send extra blood to the brain, and it inflates the blood vessels in the brain, and it acts like a little bubble wrap around their brain. So helps them to not move around even more. And I've heard that clicking sound as like a gunshot going off. I've never heard it in the wild, but it's pretty incredible. So what do their habitats look like? It's gonna vary based on the critter that you're looking at, but this right here is an example of some good desert bighorn sheep habitat. This is actually the sheep range, which is in the Desert National Wildlife Refuge, one of my favorite places here in Nevada. So you'll notice there's some steep, rocky, exposed spaces, as well as lots of things that they can eat in that area. So they can run up those slopes, get some protection from some predators in the area, and then also eat all the brush that's down there. Here's some habitat that we have in the Snowstorm Mountains, which is just outside of Winnemucca. Again, you'll notice steep terrain with lots of vegetation, and then down in that valley, there's likely water there to help them survive. Now let's get into the fun stuff, the history of the bighorn sheep. So prior to settlement of Nevada, sheep populations were in the tens of thousands in Nevada. Nationwide, we had anywhere from 1.5 to 2 million individuals. But then we came, and in the late 1800s, the mining boom began, and we started to settle the state. So when that happened, access to water became limited for our sheep, and with the large populations of people coming across the country, came the need for food, right? We all need food, and bighorn sheep happened to be a great source of protein for a lot of the settlers. So they were overhunted. And then in addition to overhunting, we introduced a bunch of domestic sheep as well as cattle. About 2.5 million domestic sheep and hundreds of thousands of cattle were on the landscape at the turn of the century. So with that also came intense competition for resources, and it also introduced a bunch of novel diseases that the bighorn sheep didn't have the capabilities of fighting off. So during this time, sheep in the northern 2/3 of the state were extirpated, so completely removed. And by 1960, we had less than 3,000 individuals on the landscape. So this is a great picture from the Wild Sheep Foundation. They come and do the sheep show every year, and they put a lot of money towards wildlife conservation, but it gives a great view of just how diminished those populations were, as well as some hope. You can see some of those populations are growing in their native ranges. So some threats to the bighorn sheep that we have today are habitat loss and fragmentation, novel diseases, and predation. So first we'll go over predation. They are a prey animal. So predation is always going to be a factor that they're going to have to live with. And predator-prey interactions are super, super complex. It's not a one-for-one type of ratio when it comes to talking about those dynamics. So in Nevada, predators of the bighorn sheep include golden eagles, coyotes, and mountain lions. I don't know if you're a golden eagle, probably not going to want to go after a ram. Coyotes and bighorn sheep typically will go after those lambs, whereas the mountain lion can go after those full-grown sheep. Mountain lions are ambush predators, so they'll happily take advantage of a bighorn that's easy to catch. And depending on the time of year, they'll actually cache their food, hide it away, and they'll come back to it for up to about 10 days. So they're not wasteful predators, that's for sure. A bigger threat to our bighorn sheep and really wildlife in general is habitat fragmentation. So you can see in the map that we have here of Nevada, we've kind of bisected a bunch of those habitats with our roadways. So as we continue to grow and expand, we're slowly taking away some of those prime habitats from our wildlife. And by creating those roads, it's making it harder for the bighorn sheep to cross populations. Sometimes they can't even get over a roadway if the guardrails are too high, and they also have, of course, the danger of getting hit by a car. So this can limit the gene transfer between herds and basically create little islands of genes, which is definitely a big concern for us. We do create wildlife crossings, however, which have been pretty effective in being able to cross different populations into one another. And in a video, you'll see one of those in a second. Novel diseases is another huge one for us that we're really concerned about. Domestic animals have brought in different diseases that have really done a number on our bighorn sheep populations. Pneumonia in particular is really bad. It is transmitted from domestic livestock to bighorn sheep, and typically domestic livestock, they don't show any symptoms, but they can pass it on to the bighorn sheep, who will bring it back to their herds. And in some cases, they can have 100% lamb mortality if there is an outbreak. So for our clinical signs for our bighorn sheep, they include nasal discharge, coughing, respiratory distress, exercise intolerance, and just general depression. Oftentimes we don't see that, we just find mortalities on the landscape. Some adults are able to recover, but it is a hard journey for them. And at this time, there is no vaccine that we could give them or treatment for pneumonia for bighorn sheep. So if you happen to spot when you're out hiking around an interaction like this one on the screen, bighorn sheep super close to a goat, please let us know because we want to try and stop any disease from getting back to the herd and affecting all of them. So that was kind of depressing. What are we doing about it? So we'll go over population monitoring, habitat restoration and modification, as well as sheep transplantation. So one of the first things our biologists do is helicopter surveys. They go up in a helicopter, fly around, get a little motion sick, and they try and figure out the number of sheep that we have on the landscape. But not only do they want to know the exact number that we have, they also want to know how many rams, ewes, and lambs are there, because that's going to give them a better idea of the whole makeup of the herd. They'll also do these surveys to determine the habitat health. See maybe where a big thing of cheatgrass is popping up, then maybe we could do some habitat restoration, those sort of things. And then they also want to know how much water is available for our animals. And water is a huge, huge importance for all of our wildlife, but desert bighorn as well. Nevada is one of the driest states, so water is an incredibly important resource. So we do give our bighorn a little helping hand, as well as other wildlife, by creating these guzzlers. And guzzlers are built by Endow, as well as a bunch of other partners like Nevada Bighorns Unlimited. They go out there for a weekend and they basically create these giant drinking fountains for a bighorn. So you'll see there's a little pool where they can drink water, and then the guzzler collects any rainwater, snow, whatever, melts it down, and it has a little basin that can hopefully be pretty self-sustaining. So through 2021, we built 207 guzzlers, and 181 were for the desert bighorns. Surprise, surprise, they live down in Southern Nevada. 24 for California bighorns, and then 2 for Rocky Mountain bighorns. Sometimes these guzzlers do dry up, and 2 years ago now, yeah, 2020 was a particularly hard year for Las Vegas, and we had a couple guzzlers that completely dried up. So we actually did some water hauls. Between August 2020 and January 2021, we hauled about 160,000 gallons of water to those guzzlers. And in June 2021 alone, we hauled about 71,000 gallons of water in just Southern Nevada. We also do a lot of habitat projects like habitat restoration, so reseeding projects after fires, seedling plantings, seed collection, water protection, invasive species removals, and so much more. So for this portion, my boss did this really cool video and I love showing it off, so I'm gonna play it. I might pause it a little early, but it's just some of the work that our habitat division does. So those are some of our seedling plantings right there. I believe this was a habitat project after one of the fires that we had. I think it was in Elko County. In my next life, I want this job. So this is one of those water hauls down in Southern Nevada that we were taking the water up to the guzzlers. Awesome. So that's just some of the work that our Habitat Division does. They do so much more, and they're always running around, coming up with new projects. Love working with them. So we also do bighorn sheep transplants. We started this in the 1960s, and we really wanted to try and establish populations that were removed when we came through in the 1800s. So our first successful relocation was in 1967. It was in the Hell Creek area of the Sheldon Creek National Wildlife Area, and it was with California bighorn. The second was in 1968, and it was with Desert Bighorn onto Mount Grant. Since then, we began relocating bighorn. There have been a couple different methods for bighorn relocation. So for the first one is the drop panel corral trap. That's the very top photo. That was used from the early 60s to the early 70s. Basically, bighorn were baited into a corral. When they got in there, the corral was dropped, the gate was dropped, and then a bunch of super brave biologists and volunteers ran in there, hobbled them, so tied their legs together so they can't get hurt, blindfolded them, and got them ready to transport. In the 80s and 90s, we started using a drop net, so that's that bottom picture. Basically a pole with a net on top. Again, you bait in the bighorn sheep, which you have to go out there for like weeks at a time just to start baiting them, getting them comfortable with the area before you even have your trap set. Once the bighorn are eating, feeling really safe, you drop the net, and then you again run in there and hobble them and get them ready to transport. This is still occasionally used, but in the late 80s, we started using the aerial net gun capture method. It's definitely less time intensive than the other two, and we can be a lot more specific with what sex we want for the relocation. So we can decide if we want more lambs, ewes, or rams. And in the next video, you'll kind of see some of that action, but it's pretty cool. We hire out people who come in with a big helicopter, and they go up there and they net the animals and then bring them down to our base camp. So here's a quick little video of some of that. So we'll take blood samples from them. Sometimes we'll put a collar. This ram had a big collar on him. This was from a transplant to Pyramid Lake that we did during the pandemic, so 2020. And then this is a mule deer, so not a bighorn sheep, but it's the same general practice. So because of the stress that they go under, you're constantly taking vitals on them. I got to be on the business end of a bighorn sheep once all day long. It was quite fun. But if they start to overheat, we spray them down with water, alcohol to get them to relax a little bit. And then this doesn't have to do with the captures, but this is one of those wildlife overpasses that we worked with NDOT to create for our wildlife. Or underpass. Okay, we go now. So transplantation by the numbers. So from 1967 to 2021, we have transplanted over 2,000 desert bighorn, over 1,000 California bighorn, and about 330 Rocky Mountain bighorn. So 3,460 animals, and that has involved 68 different mountain ranges. And we certainly can't do this alone. It comes with federal partners, nonprofits, volunteer groups. So many people are involved in these efforts. And what's really cool is you get to see it's having an impact. So the first image with all the blue, that's in 1860, the bighorn sheep population. By 1960, you can see that that has dramatically dropped. And then here we are, 2020, and we can see our bighorn sheep are getting back to their native ranges. And if you like numbers, you can see here our populations are on the rise. So where we had under 3,000 individuals in 1970, now we have over 12,000 individuals across the state of Nevada. So we hope to see this number continue to grow, see more of those colors fill in the other map that I showed you with all the yellow spots. And hopefully we'll have another healthy population of bighorn, and that number is going to keep rising. The end. Does anyone have any questions?
Do the horns ever like just fall off and like either do they grow back?
So not typically, like this is, it's pretty well attached. We took this side off, but it's all connected to that bone core. So it shouldn't be breaking off. Sometimes I'll like chip them and things like that, but I've never seen a whole sheep fall off.
If I could interject.
Yeah.
Unlike deer, these have, well, they don't shed, but the other thing is as she showed you, there's a horny space on the inside where it's an antler, it's just attached right at the skull.
Thank you.
Sorry.
No, you're all good. Thank you for adding that. Any other questions?
The herds, are they localized? Like the ones over like Buffalo?
We saw a giant herd by Walker Lake one time. What type are there? They seem to have those beautiful horns and stuff. There's a giant herd over there.
I have to look at a map.
I mean, it's a large.
It's
a desert.
It's a desert.
Yeah, it's a desert. I think it's all the way up to
See, I can
Lander County, I believe.
pull up that map again. If it wasn't at the beginning of the slideshow, that would be really helpful. There you go. Yeah, desert. Yeah, they're super cool. I am not allowed to drive near that one because I was looking for the keep lights. I'm like, where are they? Where?
Oh. But you could ride.
Yeah.
Ride along.
Yeah, and then I have to like internalize my squealing because there's no that.
I'm curious, what was your original bachelor's degree?
So I took a very non-traditional route to my job. I have my bachelor's degree in psychology. Psychology?
Oh, that's perfect for.
Yep. All day. Yeah, I'm definitely one of those oddball cases, but I'm just super nerdy about wildlife, and like throughout my entire childhood, you know, Jeff Bourne experience, crocodile hunter, my jams. Most of my books are like The Secret Lives of Bats. So I bring my work home with me every day. Awesome. Well, anyone has anything else?
So with the, what we call now the national security site, are you guys able to get out there and do surveys as well, or is that pretty well shut off still? Or?
I have to double check with my biologist on there, but I don't.
They have their own biologists. So.
I don't know how much that gets shared or what the policy with that is. Mhm. Yeah, and they're like right up against the Desert National Wildlife Refuge, so.
Right, which is very active in bat conservation.
Oh, really? Awesome. Well, if anyone wants to come up, I've got some specimens. I've got a ewe, a bighorn, and then a human skull that you can kind of compare brain cavities. And then I also have a collar and wildlife support students.
Do you want me to pull a few things up so you can talk about the Zoom?
I think we're okay. I kind of
Okay.
did a little bit.
Okay.